Welcome to Enjoy the Journey podcast, where we interview expert entrepreneurs and thought leaders to help guide you in pursuit of financial freedom. Presented to you by Jackson Milan, the Wealth Mentor, and Sam Panetta, the Money Man, where we help service-based business owners remove cash flow bottlenecks, maximize their profits, and turn business profits into personal wealth.
G'day guys, this is Jackson Milan, the Wealth Mentor here, and I'm super excited to have another episode of the Enjoy the Journey podcast. Today we're going to be talking about money memories. We're going to be talking about the significant memories that you've had on your wealth journey that are holding you back, that are preventing you from achieving financial freedom, that are causing bottlenecks in your business, that are impacting your profit, that are causing you to not have the free time and not being able to design the lifestyle that you truly want in order for you to achieve financial freedom. And we've traced this all back to a fundamental principle that we designed called Your Money Memories. Today we're going to be doing a deep dive into that to get a deep understanding of what are the money memories that have got you to where you are right now. What are the things that are holding you back? And how can you remove that baggage to be able to get on the right path for what you're trying to achieve in life and in business? So let's get started. So guys, when I ask you, what are your money memories? What do you think of? What comes to mind for you? I know for me that there's a single defining moment that comes to mind every time I think about my money memories. It's my earliest money memory. Because I think for all of us, if we think long and hard enough, there is a single earliest money memory that we have that in some cases is positive and in some cases is negative. For me, it was a situation when I was around about 3 years old. I remember that my mum had taken me to a friend's house. My friend had a couple of daughters and we were playing in the front yard, innocently. I had my toys there. I remember that I had a little pool cart, and being the early 90s, kids could still play in their front yards with no concerns. Now, at the time, I don't know how this idea came to mind, but I had this light bulb moment. The light bulb moment was that I wanted to try and make money. So I decided to convince the girls that we were playing with to put my toys into this cart. We picked some flowers from the garden, and then we proceeded to go door to door trying to sell these toys and sell these flowers. Now, what 3-year-old child is able to make that connection? To make that connection between their belongings, which for most kids, when I think back, is their most important material possessions, their toys. Like, kids lose their absolute mind when you take those things away from them. But for some reason, I never had that connection. My connection was the connection between the value that I knew that those toys contained and the fact that I wanted to make money. Now, we were quite successful from memory. We went door to door, and I still remember that there was the shock on people's faces when they saw us, these young kids, 3 and 4 years old, going around and selling these items. And we were actually quite successful. We made a little bit of money. I don't think we charged fairly for the toys that we were selling. I think we were charging like 50 cents or $1 or something like that. But we were successful. And I'm not sure how long we were gone for, but all I remember was that I was just finishing leaving a house from making a sale, and then a police squad car rocked up with my mum in the back, in a white dress, panicking, looking like she'd seen a ghost, running towards me, grabbing her in her arms and holding me tightly. I was confused. I had absolutely no idea what I'd done wrong, and she wasn't angry. She was upset. Obviously, she had no idea what had happened to us. And I know that I got into a lot of trouble after that. But that was my earliest money memory, and I think that looking back on my life and my career and everything that I've achieved, when it come to finance and when it come to entrepreneurship, I was always the last person to the party. What do I mean by that? Everyone else knew my destiny. Everyone else knew what I was going to go on to do before I did. The penny dropped finally. And I had these entrepreneurial DNA from when I was a young child. And that's ultimately been the trajectory that my life has been on ever since. Since 3 years old to now 31. Now, not all of my money memories are positive, and I expect that for many of you, that's the case for you too. And my next money memory was a money memory where I was probably 6 or 7 years old, and I remember, as if it were yesterday, I come home from school, I walked into the kitchen, and on the kitchen table there was a pile of bills, unopened. Now, as a 6 or 7 year old child, like you understand that adults have responsibilities, and you understand that at a high level things have costs, right? And I knew at the time that was wrong. Like you're supposed to open your letters. You're supposed to look what's inside. And I remember asking my mum, I go, Mum, why aren't you opening those letters? And she quickly responded, well, I already know what's inside. There's no reason to open them. Now, we were never wealthy. We got by. I never went without anything. I wouldn't say we were poor, but my parents struggled. They struggled a lot, and they were constantly doing everything in their power to try and make ends meet, to try and hustle and do whatever they had to ensure that I had everything that I wanted. And it was at this point I realized that my parents had a lot of financial baggage. Years later, I realized the significance that these money memories actually had on me. It wasn't until I took the time to sit down and really think about it that I realized that a lot of those things were a catalyst for things that occurred in my life as an adult, for good and for bad. Now, I want to ask you, when you think back, what are your money memories? Where did your money memories come from? And when we facilitate this exercise for our mastermind clients, we break this down into a series of stages, because typically speaking, there are key defining stages whereby we obtain and firmly cement these money memories that ultimately influences our behavior. The first stage is what we call school you. And school you is typically you between the ages of 4 and, let's call it 18. This is where you are not having to take on any adult responsibilities. Your money management is typically going to be one of two things. It's either that you've been taught from a very early age that you should save before you spend, and that for every dollar you receive, you should put money away, and that you should be conscious and defer gratification. Or on the flip side, you did none of that. Every dollar you made, you spent, whether that be on lollies or toys or experiences or skateboards or whatever that might be. I want you to think about, for school you, what are the defining money memories that come to mind for you? Now, when I think about it, and particularly thinking about those two examples, my dad was always trying his best to teach me the right fundamentals. The right fundamentals around business, the right fundamentals around money and entrepreneurship. And he always said to me, he goes, Jack, out of every dollar that you earn, you should put away a third of it. Put away a third, spend 2/3. You need to put it away for a rainy day. And at the time, I had absolutely no way of visualizing what a rainy day looked like. I took it very literally. I go, well, why the hell do I need to have all of this money piled up if it's raining? What am I going to spend it on? Why don't I spend it now? And the penny never dropped for me with that. It was never something that resonated with me. On the flip side, my dad was a hustler. He taught me how to make money, very quickly, make money easily, how to flip things, how to turn nothing into something. A lot of my entrepreneurial skills as a child came from flea markets. My dad and I would go to garage sales and go to local council cleanups, and we'd do whatever we possibly could to find things that had value, that were being sold under their intrinsic value. And we packaged them up, we cleaned them up, we fixed them, we made them look pretty, and then we took them to flea markets once a month. We used to go to the Dapto Greyhounds track flea market once a month. I think it was the first Sunday of every month. We'd wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning, we'd pack his old Subaru to the brim. with all of this, let's call it crap. And we'd go to the flea markets and we would sell what we created. And we would make good money. I remember that as a kid, like we'd make $300, $400, $500, $600 on a Sunday from something that we had never spent $1 on. In many cases, we'd got picked up at a local garage sale for 20 cents, 50 cents. And it showed me the power of turning something small into something big. Now, because of this cash flow, I was always spending. I was always hustling to buy the next thing. And it was a big defining moment for me that it took me well into my 20s to be able to kick the habit. I remember even as a child, and my poor mum, I put her through the ringer. As a child, I had this idea in my head, and even now, I'm very much a spontaneous individual. I got this idea, I don't know where I got it from, but I wanted to get a snake. I wanted to get a pet children's python. I think at the time it was $200. So we went down to the local pet shop, and then we put in an order for this children's python. It took us a couple of months to get it. I got all of the gear. We took it home, and we had the python for, I think it was about a year or so. And then the new Game Boy Advance came out. The color one. Color Game Boy Advance. And I wanted it. I got every single catalog. You know, the Kmart ones or the Big W ones that used to come in the mail where you had all of the toys and everything in the catalog. I'd get those catalogs and I'd sit there for hours circling the different things that I was going to purchase and writing down and calculating exactly how much I needed and working out exactly, reverse engineering the steps that I needed to take to get there. And there we go, light bulb moment again. Well, I've got this snake. It's a little bit boring now. I've had it for a couple of years. Well, why don't I sell it? So I went down to the local pet store, and there was a fellow down there, and his name was Russell. And I explained to Russell, I said, "Hey, Russell, I've got this snake. Remember, I bought it a couple of years ago." And he said, "Yeah, great. How's it going?" And yeah, the snake's really great. How about I bring it down to show you? And he goes, "Oh, that'd be great. Yeah, I'd love to see it." So I went home, I packaged up the snake. The snake was called Measly. I think I picked up the name from a kid's cartoon. And I took Measly down to the pet store to show Russell. Well, Russell, hey, well, the snake's here. Like, it's really healthy. It's really, really, really cool. Look, I'm thinking that I want to move it on. Like, would you like it? He goes, "Oh, yeah, I'd love it. Yeah, well, how much do you want?" And I sold it to him for the exact price that it was going to cost me to buy my entire combo selection of all of the gear for my Game Boy Advance. Turned a snake into currency into a Game Boy Advance, and I remember playing Pokemon and Zelda until 4 o'clock in the morning. So the creation of cash flow was never an issue for me. It was holding on to it. Now, the next version is the real world you. Once you've got clear on your school you, what about the real world you? When you leave school, you go out into the real world, where you get your first taste for what the world is really about as an adult. What were the defining money memories that come to mind for you? And for me, there was multiple. But the first one was that when I was in high school, I was never very popular. I moved around a lot between my mum and my dad. My mum typically always lived in Sydney, and my dad lived in Wollongong. And I was a naughty kid, so I'd constantly be going backwards and forwards between mum and dad for my own choice or stuff that happened. Whatever had happened, I changed schools on a number of occasions. And I got so sick and tired of constantly making new friends and going through that process that I was never very popular. So when I got to year 11, all of my friends that I had dropped out of school. And there was only one of my friends left. And we come up with this idea and we go, wow, we can't hack this school thing anymore. We need to get out of here. We need to go start making some money. So we went to go and have a meeting with the career counsellor. I remember heading into the career counsellor's office with my friend. And my friend's name was Ben. And we sat down and we said, okay, well, we were thinking about dropping out of school. And he's like, okay, well, what do you want to do? Well, that's why we're here to see you, sir. You're meant to be the career counsellor. What should we do? And he goes, okay, well, what are you interested in? What do you want to do? He goes, well, Ben and I looked at each other. Well, we want to get into something that we can make a lot of money. We don't really care what it is. Tell us, what can we go and do that will make us a lot of money? And the career counsellor kind of sat back in his chair for a moment, crossed his arms, looked up to the ceiling, pondering. After a few moments, aha, I've got it. Concrete cancer. Ben and I looked at each other, really confused. And I look back to him and I go, concrete can get cancer, sir? And he goes, yeah, it's like a problem with the concrete, and this guy goes out with this machine and like he x-rays the concrete cancer and he charges a lot of money for that. And then Ben and I just started laughing. And we go, yeah, no worries, mate. Ended up getting up and leaving. There was no way in hell we were going to be a concrete cancer guy. So I dropped out, year 11, midway through, and decided to go get a job in hospitality at a place called Wellbeing. It was a kind of a healthy fast food joint that made like sandwiches and soups and stuff and juices and stuff like that at Martin Place. And it was directly below the Macquarie offices. Now, I'd had jobs in hospitality for a lot of my childhood. I was always hustling, always working. As soon as I could start working, I think it was from 13, I had a job. And I was always looking to make money. So hospitality was easy. I'm like, cool, let's go get a job at hospitality. Now I remember, every single lunch, these guys in suits would come down. Nice suits, nice shoes, well presented, came in to order their lunch. And then at the end of the week, I'd get my paycheck, and it was a measly $300 or $400, which, hey, for a 17-year-old kid isn't too bad, right? But when I thought about it, and I thought back to all of my previous money memories, it didn't make sense. It didn't make sense at all. How the hell am I going to get ahead financially? How am I going to be able to do all the things that I want to do in this world with that amount of money? And I did it for a while. I did it for about 6 months. And I was frustrated and I was fed up and I wasn't going anywhere. Now, at that time, it never occurred to me to start a business. Back to my previous point, I was always the last person to the party when it came to me identifying the fact that I was actually an entrepreneur. And I remember that my mum was listening to AM radio, 2GB or something like that, and she identified this school. It was a second chances school. It was a second chances school in Crow's Nest called Bradfield. Bradfield, a second chance school for high school dropouts. And I don't know how I came to the decision, but I remember I come home one day and Mum said to me, Jack, I've got this opportunity that I need to tell you about. And I remember she sat me down and she spoke to me about it. And I don't think I come up with much resistance, but I realized that I needed to do something. And I thought that the only way for me to go do something with my life was to go back to school and finish year 12. So I enrolled in Bradfield. I went back and redid year 11. I crushed it because I was already halfway through it. I knew everything. I kind of coasted my way through year 12. I got a really crappy high school certificate UAI because I basically just breezed through out of just being a bright kid. And then with my HSC over, with a crappy UAI, not even enough to get into university, I go, well, shit. Well, there's another 2 years gone. It doesn't seem like I'm any better off. What am I going to do? So I had a friend at the time. His name was Matt. And Matt was working in a call center. The call center was in Redfern. He was getting only inbound calls. I believe they were selling utility stuff. I think it was electricity or something like that. Something crap. It was really crappy, but he was making really good money. He was making $45,000. I go, wow, $45,000. And of course, to an 18-year-old kid, $45,000 seems like $1 million. You're living at home, rent-free, and not having to worry about anything other than your own expenses of going out on the weekend and getting hammered. $45,000 goes a long way. So I go, okay, well, I'm going to look at something like that. And I remember I went on to Seek, I looked for jobs, and I found this job as a trainee financial advisor at a place called the Financial Advice Centre. As always, I'd always go and ask my dad for advice. And I said, Dad, look, I'm not sure what I want to do. I'm thinking about getting a job in a call centre. I'm thinking about becoming a trainee financial advisor. I ultimately want to go and get a job at that Macquarie place in Martin Place. And I heard that you get $100,000 a year by just going and getting coffees. I don't know where I pulled that from. And my dad said to me, he goes, Jack, if you want to make money in this world, you need to be around money. And he said, when I was in the 80s, late 80s, I used to do that same job. My dad had never told me this before. My dad was a blue-collar worker. He'd worked in the oil and gas industry for all of my childhood, as far as I could remember. I remember when, as a kid, I was very young, and my dad used to drive a red Celica, and he used to wear a suit to work. But I never knew what he did. I absolutely had no idea what he did. And then he busted out this briefcase and he showed me all of his old certificates when he used to be an advisor. He used to work for AMP and he worked for National Mutual before that. And, oh wow, okay. This is a bit crazy. Without me even knowing, I'm heading on the same path as my old man. I'm going to do it. So I signed up. I got the job. I turned up. And it was the most shocking thing that I'd ever seen. This place was multiple floors of cubicles. Imagine that scene in Wolf of Wall Street where you see all of those people on the phone, screaming, carrying on, throwing things around, going mental when they make a sale. It was the closest thing to that as you could possibly imagine. The only thing that was missing was the midget throwing. There was electricity in the air, but it wasn't in a good way. People were carrying on and ringing bells and clapping and shouting when they made sales. It was toxic. I started there. I went through the trainee program. They taught us about sales. They taught us about neuro-linguistic programming and cognitive behavioral therapy and understanding the hidden body language and tonality in somebody's voice and how to control and dictate the pace of conversations and how to ultimately influence somebody to do what you want. And I hated it. I saw all of these people around me that had the lifestyles and were earning big commissions and driving the nice cars and living in nice houses. But the reality was that they were taking advantage of the people that they were calling. All of these people that they were calling were members, clients of big banks that were being called to be sold products that they probably didn't need. And this was just before the global financial crisis. I was in a bullpen selling crappy products to people who could least afford it. People who lost their jobs and got themselves into some pretty significant financial hardship. And I was terrible at it. And I was very, very quickly fired. I was really happy about that because I was not willing to compromise my professional integrity, which at the time I didn't even know what professional integrity was. I just knew it was wrong. I wasn't willing to do that in exchange for a buck. I thought there was something wrong with me. I was so upset that I was fired. But looking back in hindsight, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. It was the catalyst that helped define me in that real world use stage. So what's that defining moment for you? What's that moment, whether it be positive or negative, that you can remember that you had that oh shit moment where the penny really dropped? The next version is the Street Fighter you. The Street Fighter you is when you started your business, when you started the hustle, when you started the grind. Now, I had multiple kind of dipping my toe in the water experiences of my business before I actually dove feet first, probably more like face first, into my business. I knew the power of selling online. My mum had a number of accidents. My mum was an aged care worker, and prior to that she was a hairdresser, but she couldn't do hairdressing anymore. It was just too hard on her body. So she decided to get into aged care. And I remember that mum had an accident in a facility. She slipped on some chemicals in on I guess a concrete walkway, common area of the facility, slid probably 10 meters, fell on her elbow, shattered her elbow in about 15 different places. Unbelievable injury, crazy injury, in a really, really bad way. Couldn't work in aged care again. And didn't have any insurances, got paid workers' compensation. The workers' compensation laws had just changed, and she didn't have enough money to make ends meet. So she discovered selling on eBay. My mum, similar to my dad, had this eye, an eye for opportunity. She would go to opportunity shops and Vinnie's and all of these places, and she was able to see and spot a bargain. My mum could see a designer label piece of clothing from 100 meters away. And she knew value. Now I know where I got it from. And she would buy these things for cents on the dollar, wash them, dry clean them, press them, photo shoot them, put them on eBay, and make money. And I saw my mum doing this, and I go, okay, well, there must be an opportunity here. So my first iteration of my business was selling women's swimwear on eBay. And funnily enough, I don't think I've told anyone this outside of my family, but I basically went online. I found these swimming costumes, bikinis, and stuff like that from China. I imported them, I listed them on eBay, and I made some pretty good margins. I never took it very seriously. It was always pretty small fry stuff. It was maybe 3 to 5 sales a week. A bit of pocket change. It was all I ever wanted. Now fast forward, and I was working for a big bank. It was a huge new piece of legislation that came into play, and the bank had decided to get on the front foot. They had all of these senior advisors in the bank that were sitting on massive portfolios of clients. We're talking clients like they had 4,000, 8,000 clients. All of these clients who were relying on them for financial advice. It is physically impossible for one person to provide financial advice to 4,000 or 8,000 clients. And the reality was they were probably only servicing maybe 200 or 300 of the best clients, and then all of the rest of them were getting no service. So the bank decided to go through a massive restructure. They basically said that any clients that weren't being serviced, nobody got paid for, and then their kind of junior advisor force, which at that point in time was me, they were restructuring our remuneration, and I ultimately got a salary reduction of about $40,000 overnight. Big impact. Now, at that time, my father was just diagnosed with late-stage stomach cancer. I remember that I went to Dad's place with my girlfriend at the time, and Dad was coming down. He didn't look good, and he walked me down to the car. And we were about to leave, and he said, "Jack, I don't think I'm going to be around for much longer." And I said, "Don't be stupid. What's wrong? What's going on?" I said, "I don't feel well." Much to my surprise, my dad had been internally bleeding for probably about 3 weeks. He was, when he went to the toilet, blood was coming out. It was not good. And at the very last minute, we forced him to go to the hospital. And the doctors basically said when they did the tests on him that you've lost so much blood, you've bled so much internally, we don't know how you're still alive. And if you survive the next 72 hours, you'll be lucky. So they rushed him into operation. They did what they could. Post-operation, he'd lost about 30 kilos over the course of the next couple of weeks. And they said to him, you've got about 3 weeks to live. He kept defying the odds, time and time and time again. And he got to a point where he got out of hospital and they said, look, you've probably got a couple of months, if at best. So you've got to do what you can. At this point in time, my dad was the primary breadwinner. He had a stay-at-home wife. He had a young school-aged daughter that was 8 or 9 years old. And I had my stepsister who was not working at the time. And I need to roll up my sleeves and do my bit. My dad didn't have insurance. He wasn't protected. He had no real emergency fund in place. He was living month to month trying to keep everything afloat, just running the household on a smell of an oil rag. And I had just got this massive pay cut. We had this sizable mortgage on the family home, and it was a matter of me trying to do something and trying to save the family home, or doing nothing and let it be taken. In my mind, all I could see was me rolling my sleeves up and finding a solution, or my family being homeless. So I decided the best possible idea, the best thing that I could do, was to start a business. Now, that business wasn't in the finance industry at all. I went back to what had worked. I guess I'd always been a lazy entrepreneur. My ideas were always lazy. There was a path of least resistance. And I said, well, okay, I did that eBay thing for a while. Why can't I do it again, just on a bigger scale? And just like that, I decided to set up a business called Siete Clothing Co., which was a men's fashion label from scratch. I'd never designed a piece of clothing in my life. I'd never produced a clothing line in my life. I had never dealt with overseas suppliers when you're working with custom clothing. I'd never worked on the logistics at this scale, and I decided to take everything that I had, pour it into this business, build a website, and start selling. Now, I have no idea why I didn't double down on my advice career. I could have started my own advisory business. I could have chased a better paying role. I could have worked to win more clients and earn more money. I didn't. I did the bare minimum in my day job in order to fuel this business. Now, this business was an absolute cash-eating monster. It sent me multiple six figures into debt. Now, we saved the house. Dad recovered. He got back to work. My business kept consuming money. I ended up multiple six figures in the hole with no end in sight, and I absolutely hated it. I hated the industry, I hated the people, I hated the process, I hated the fact of the stock take and the attention to detail and the taking of the photos and the updating the photos and doing the listings on eBay and all of the various aspects of the business. I absolutely hated it. I realized that I'd set up this business purely in blind pursuit of money. It was the only thing that I cared about. That wasn't what was important. And it was when the penny finally dropped where I made the transition from Street Fighter you to Growth you. Now, I want you to ask yourself, what was that Street Fighter stage? And that Street Fighter stage is super important because I think that we have to go through some level of adversity to be able to appreciate the value of our success. Otherwise, we take it for granted, right? And it was that contrast that kind of rising from the ashes that gave me the perception, that gave me the connection to my purpose, that gave me the drive and the passion to go and pursue my dreams. Now, at the time, I was holding on to that fashion business. But I had this moment, and I was going through this program. It was called the Entourage. And the Entourage, I joined it because I was struggling in the business. I knew I needed help. I had some friends that had gone through the program, and they said, Jackson, you need to do this. You need to get the support. You need to get the mentorship. You need to get the education. So I joined. I couldn't afford it at the time. I think it was like $1,100 a month. I put it on my credit card. It put me further into debt, but it was the best thing that I ever did. Now, at the time, I was working in a job as an advisor. I was the 2IC in this practice, and the owner of the business knew about my fashion business. He was pretty supportive in the beginning. Begrudgingly, over time, he was not so supportive. And he was always baiting. He said, focus on your advisory career. You'll get equity here. You'll get an opportunity here. You'll get an ownership. You're my succession plan. And he talked about, he goes, I had a previous guy before you who was supposed to be my succession plan, and he's gone on to start his own business, and he stitched me up, and you're my last shot. So he set the goalposts, and I thought they were pretty clear, and the goalposts continued to get moved. He set the goal, I achieved it, got moved. Set the goal, I achieved it, got moved. And I got frustrated. And through going through this Entourage program, I became more and more aware of the fact that my fashion business was not what I wanted to do. And finally, the penny dropped. I decided to shut down the fashion business, and I decided to start a business consultancy. Now, at the time, I had a very little business experience. I had not been successful in business. But I realized that I was passionate about business. And I felt that the best way to learn about business was to be surrounded by other business people. And look, I was naturally bright. I don't want to blow my toot my own horn too much, but I was a problem solver. I'd taken the practice that I was in from having a client base of 4,000 down to 550, and it was a more profitable business, a more sustainable business. The clients were happier, the staff were happier, everyone was happier. It was implementing these strategies that I realized that I had a knack for this. So I created a business consultancy called Innovate Now Consulting. I updated my LinkedIn profile. I created a Facebook page. I started going to win clients. They were getting results. Now, I had colleagues in the business that I was working in that knew about my consultancy, but we were friendly and they didn't tell my boss. And one day on Facebook, I got this friend request from a random profile. It looked fake. And as soon as I got it, I knew who it was. It was my boss. He was sussing me out. And on my profile, stupidly, but probably the best decision that I ever made in hindsight, my title on Facebook was Head Honcho of Innovate Now Consulting. The next day, he called me into his office and he slid a piece of paper across the table and basically said, here's your resignation letter, sign it now, and I'll pay you out for a month. And that's the end of it. If I find out that you've taken any clients, I'll sue you to oblivion. I go, okay, I've got no choice here. Signed the resignation and then went on my way. And as if it were a door closing behind me and another door opening in front of me, this opportunity presented itself. It was a phenomenal opportunity. The opportunity to get equity in a business, an advisory business, to build it from the ground up. They contacted me and said, Jackson, we have a successful mortgage broking business. Our advisory business is not really working the way we want it. We need someone who's young and hungry, who's going to build it from the ground up, and we will give them a stake in the business. I took it with open arms. I revolutionized that business. We scaled it to number one in the country. We had over 400% growth. We scaled the team from 1 to 16 by the end of it, with all of the team members across all areas of the business. It was hugely successful. Won Advisor of the Year, Branch of the Year, Thought Leader of the Year, Entrepreneur of the Year, all of the accolades that you could possibly want. Now I'd come full circle, last person to the party. I realized that I'd finally found my groove. I'd finally found a place where I could grow. Now, I wasn't dissatisfied with my industry. At the time, I thought I was. I was dissatisfied with the environment that I was in. When given the environment to grow and thrive, be able to have the ability to architect a strategy, execute it, bring it to life, I loved it. And then the growth came. Now, multiple seven-figure businesses later, now having a team of 20 in Aureus Financial, having a business that is growing and thriving with happy clients, 100% five-star reviews, an international best-selling book in 8 countries across 15 categories. Seen as a thought leader in our space. My current you is a result, a lag indicator of everything, every single money memory that I've had up until now. So what does growth you look like? When did that happen? When did you find yourself in your element of getting those results that you wanted, and how were you turning up? And how have all of those stages of your money memories resulted in the person that you are right now? Now, once you know your money memories, you've taken the time to map them out, you understand the significance of those money memories, and you've been able to work out what you need to do next to be able to get yourself on the right trajectory to overcome those invisible ceilings, to start getting on the trajectory that you really want, then that's where the magic happens. I remember that my dad told me a saying that his dad told him. And he said, in life we have a backpack. And as we walk on our journey of life, we pick up things that we find along the way and we put that in our backpack. But there comes a point in life where you need to stop. Although you may lose momentum, you need to sort through your backpack and you need to create new space. Because it doesn't matter what opportunities come by, if you don't have the capacity to take them, they'll never mean anything. So I hope this podcast has been valuable. It's been a good opportunity to share some experiences through my life and how these money memories have related to me and my journey, and I hope that you can do the same. So if this has been of value, please feel free to share. What were the things that came to mind? What were the defining moments for you, both positive and negative? How can you learn from those moments to be able to set yourself on the right path for the life and the business that you want to create for yourself? And on that note, I wish you all the best in pursuit of financial freedom, and we look forward to catching you next time for the next episode of the Enjoy the Journey podcast. We'll chat to you soon.